If you're thinking about reading Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code or watching its movie adaptation, you might be wondering what the fuss is all about. Is there any truth to this story of intrigue, mystery, and murder that follows symbologist Robert Langdon and cryptologist Sophie Nauvoo as they try to prevent a sinister plot by the powerful and secretive organization called the Priory of Sion? Well, it depends on how much stock you put in the Bible. The Da Vinci Code imagines Mary Magdalene as Jesus' wife and the mother of his child. This clashes with the biblical account of Mary Magdalene as a devoted follower of Jesus, though not his wife, who was present at his crucifixion and was the first witness of his resurrection. So who is right, the Da Vinci Code or the Bible? Let's dig into the evidence. Mary Magdalene is mentioned 14 times in the New Testament, more than most of Jesus' disciples. She is described as a follower of Jesus who traveled with him and his disciples, witnessed his death, and was the first person he appeared to after his resurrection. There are also claims that she had been a prostitute at one time, but that's based on a single, not very reputable source. In fact, scholars debate whether Magdalene is even her real name. According to the Da Vinci Code, Mary Magdalene was actually Mary of Nazareth, Jesus' aunt and the sister of Jesus' mother, Mary, but again, that's not supported by the Bible. It is, however, supported by one medieval text, the Book of Secrets, which claims that Jesus entrusted the mission of spreading his teachings to Mary Magdalene, whom he referred to as his sister. That could be a reference to Mary of Clopas, who is listed among Jesus' female followers in the Gospel of Mary, but the authenticity of these two texts is highly questionable. On the other hand, the Bible does hint that Mary Magdalene was from Magdala, a town on the northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee. It says, "He also said, 'Heal this woman. She has been a vessel of Satan for 8 years. She was probably called Magdalene because she was from there." This would also explain why she followed Jesus around. She wanted him to heal her from the demon that possessed her. Indeed, this is what he did. In addition to her name, the only other clues we have about Mary Magdalene's background come from the Da Vinci Code, which claims she grew up hearing stories about her cousin Jesus from her mother Mary, who worked as a handmaiden in the temple in Jerusalem. It sounds nice, but it's pure fiction. In the Bible, Mary Magdalene is introduced in the Gospel of Mark as a woman who was freed from 7 demons. Then we meet her again in the Gospel of Luke, where she is part of a group of women who followed Jesus and his disciples, including Mary of Bethany and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's agent. Mary Magdalene is the first witness of Jesus' resurrection. She goes to the tomb early in the morning, perhaps on the first day of the week, which in the original language could mean Sunday or Saturday, and finds the stone rolled away. An angel tells her not to be afraid and informs her that Jesus has risen. She then runs to tell the disciples, but they do not believe her. Later, Jesus appears to her and says, "Go and tell my brothers, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Thus, Mary Magdalene becomes the first evangelist, the person who spreads the good news that Jesus is risen from the dead. Scholars debate how historically accurate this account is. Some argue that it's based on oral tradition passed down from Jesus' disciples, while others see signs that the author of the 4th Gospel composed the story independently. Still, there is no serious argument that Mary Magdalene did not witness Jesus' resurrection. As for her relationship to Jesus, some scholars have speculated that she was his wife, pointing to a mysterious line in the Gospel of Mary that reads, "And the disciples said to him, 'Tell us what this means, the kingdom of heaven, which are you setting in us?'" They argue that the word "us" implies a plural, suggesting that Mary Magdalene wasn't the only disciple. However, the original language is ambiguous on this point. Plus, the verse immediately following that one clearly indicates that the disciples are all male. The idea that Jesus had a wife is also refuted by Paul, who says, "I want to remind you that Christ was the Son of God, born after the law to Abraham, and that he himself was the head of the new creation, born of a woman, born under the law." 1 Timothy 2, verse 8. And of course, the Bible tells us that Jesus had brothers, James, Joses, Simon, and Judas. Scholars identify them as sons of Mary, Jesus' biological mother. What's more, the Bible nowhere describes Mary Magdalene as Jesus' wife. Those claims are found only in the Da Vinci Code, which cites another dubious medieval text, called Doctrine of Addai and Mari. According to this text, when Jesus learned that King Chistotales was planning to marry his sister Mary to a man named Joseph, He intervened and told them that his blood relative was worthy of a better fate. The passage goes on to say that when Jesus asked Mary if she would like to be his wife, she accepted. But when an unnamed disciple questioned this arrangement, Jesus replied, "How is it that you, while walking on earth, do not understand the things that pertain to the kingdom of heaven?" The idea that Mary Magdalene was Jesus' wife is also indirectly refuted by the Catholic Church, which venerates her as a saint and recognizes her feast day on July. If she were the wife of Jesus, which the Church rejects, she would be a lot higher up on the list of saints. In fact, she'd be in the same league as the Virgin Mary, Jesus' mother, and would be called the Mother of Christ. Instead, Mary Magdalene is venerated as a virgin. So far, we've seen no credible historical evidence that Mary Magdalene was married to Jesus, yet the idea persists in popular culture. Partly because of Don Brown's books and movies, but also because of a curious statement made by Pope Francis in 2023, asked during a press conference if the Bible was wrong about Mary Magdalene being Jesus' wife. The Pope replied, "Well, this is a modern discussion, but I believe the Church is sufficiently equipped to make this judgment." His comments sparked controversy and confusion, leading the Vatican to clarify that the Pope was merely acknowledging that there is scholarly debate about Mary Magdalene's status. Even if the Bible never explicitly calls Mary Magdalene Jesus' wife, some still think it implies it. Enter the Gospel of Philip, an early Christian text discovered in the Nag Hammadi library, along with other Gnostic texts. Unlike the canonical Gospels, the Gospel of Philip is not part of the Bible. It contains unorthodox ideas not found elsewhere in Scripture. For instance, it says that Mary Magdalene was Jesus' companion, adding, "She is the one who reclines on his chest and listens to his sayings." His disciples, therefore, were annoyed at her and said to him, "Why is it that you permit her to do this, while we are your disciples?" On hearing their question, he said, "Look, I have nowhere to put my trust, so I allow her to recline on my chest. This is the closest thing to marital intimacy we find in Scripture, but it's important to note that the phrase 'on my chest' doesn't necessarily imply sexual closeness. Other ancient texts use it to describe a close student-teacher relationship. Furthermore, the Gospel of Philip is just one of many non-biblical sources that describe Mary Magdalene in a positive light. In fact, many early Christians revered her as a saint. According to legend, Mary Magdalene fled to France after Jesus' death and eventually became the first bishop of the southern French city of Aix-en-Provence. There is no evidence to support this claim, but it led to the proliferation of artifacts purportedly connected with Mary Magdalene, such as the Holy Grail. Today, more than 20 million Catholics visit the village of Saint Remy de Provence every year to pay homage to the relics of Mary Magdalene housed in the Basilica of Saint Mary Magdalene. They include the alleged perfume bottle used by Mary to anoint Jesus' feet and the veil that covered his mother at the time of his crucifixion. Neither relic has been authenticated. So there you have it, the case for and against the idea that Mary Magdalene was Jesus' wife. Given the lack of scriptural evidence, I'd say the Bible wins out over the Da Vinci Code. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you haven't already.